This month's edition of Close Up in Class looks at net neutrality and regulating the internet. Our guests are Neil Stevens, a front-page writer for RedState.com for the past 7 years. Mr. Stevens' daily blog is called Tech at Night. Chancellor Williams is Associate Policy Director for FreePress.net. Free Press works to ensure that media and telecommunication policies serve the public interest. Mr. Williams lobbies and advocates on Capitol Hill and at the FCC. Neil, what role, if any, should the government have in regulating the internet?
I think that what we saw back in the 90s with President Clinton and Speaker Gingrich when they passed the Telecommunications Act was that we had a broad national consensus that we should have a light touch, that government can have a role just for setting very basic ground rules, but beyond that, we should let the private sector come up with new ideas and innovate and get government out of the way of letting the internet grow and develop in ways that maybe we couldn't have thought of before.
We're talking about regulating the transmission component of the internet. So the fact that it is two-way communication from one point to the other is what we're actually talking about. We're not talking about the content that rides over it. In fact, we think people should have access to whatever they want to, and no content should be favored over another online. So what we really want to focus on is our internet service providers, the companies we pay like Comcast or Verizon to get access to the internet. Most Americans only have one or two choices of who their internet service provider is, and that means that those folks have a lot of power. And if they have the power to tell us what we can do and say online, we have to go through their infrastructure to get there. That's a really disturbing prospect.
When we put government in the way, then people end up getting afraid to take risks, because then government will come in and say no and will punish you for it. So we end up getting an internet that works more like the phone company. And the phone company, you have no choices, you get your service, and that's just it. There's no flexibility for people. And I think that is our risk, that the more regulation we do, the less flexibility we'll have for getting the internet service we need.
Chance, could you explain what Title II is?
Title II is a provision of the Communications Act, and that provision defines services as telecommunications or communications services. And what has gone on in the past is that internet service has been referred to as an information service based on some previous decisions that were made at the FCC around 10 years ago. And what that has done is it hasn't given the FCC the legal grounding that they need to create rules that would stop blocking and discrimination online. So Title II is what enables the FCC to treat internet service like the common carriage service that it is. I think when most of us connect to the internet, we want to get online to go and do whatever we want to, and it's not so much about any information service that a particular internet service provider is giving to us, but it's more about the connection itself. And Title II gives the FCC the authority that it needs to make sure that that connection is not interfered with by our internet service providers.
The way to understand it is to compare it with wireless internet. We can go to the street and get 3 or 4 different wireless providers giving us internet wherever we are, because we've let that market bloom even more. People can go with AT&T or Verizon, T-Mobile, Sprint. We have those options. I think if we could bring that flexibility to the wired market at home, we would get options we never imagined possible.
Internet service providers should be treated as common carriers, and what that means is that they treat all people who are trying to use the network equally. That's the way that the internet has always worked. That was the way it was intended to work. That's the way our postal system works. That's the way our telephone system works. And we think that's a good model.